welcome to Albinism Life with me, Kristina Venning Rose. Thank you so much for dropping by to my podcast. Today, I had a great conversation with Luke Freeborough. Luke has albinism. He does a very, very interesting job. He designs cruise ships, which is something you might not have thought would be possible if you had albinism. We talk about being called Father Christmas, dyeing your hair, masking your vision, masking your albinism, dating, school, pretty much you name it, we chat about it, and I really, really enjoyed our conversation. So sit back, enjoy this, and join me at the end. I just started asking Luke to tell me a little bit about himself.
Hi, I'm Luke Freeborough. I'm a project manager for MSC Cruises, working in their new building department. I live in Guildford. I'm English, and I'm 41. I have 3 wonderful children and my wife. My son is 12. My daughters are 9 and 4, and they're all in school as of September. They're all doing really well. None of them have albinism. Albinism is not a trend in my family. I'm the only one.
Tell me a bit about growing up. This is a question that some people can answer, that I've asked, and some people was there a point when you're first conscious, when did you first realise that you were different from other people?
To be honest, there wasn't a particularly defining moment that resonates. It was more not being able to go out into the sunshine for the same amount of time as my friends, or having help in school, because I had a teaching assistant assist me from probably year 1, I think, and the fact that I was taught to type at a very early age. So there were differences all the way along, but there was not really a defining moment that I can draw upon that was like, I'm different. It's just been the small things that added up to the way that either people were around me or the way that I was perceived. I don't know, as a child, you don't really notice those things. It's just kind of, you live in the moment. Only really when I got to middle school did I start hearing names being called and things like that, which is tough. But I have 2 older brothers who taught me to be quite robust, shall we say, and manage things face on. From a very early age, my mum and dad got involved with the Albinism Fellowship to understand albinism a bit more, I think. From quite early on. So they were surrounded by people who were in a more difficult situation than I was in that there were people from African backgrounds with albinism, and the stigma behind that, and it's far more weighty than it is from a very middle English, we're all quite pale and afraid of the sun in England. So it wasn't seen as quite the stigma, and as a result, I think my parents decided to just not deal with it head on. Maybe it was something for them. They were slightly in denial about it all, but I don't think that was the case. I think it was more that they just treated me as the same as my brothers. One of my brothers was very sporty and went off and did sports, and my other brother was not. So I kind of had the choice of the 2. Neither of them were particularly musical, so they drove me to do music. So I did music from an early age. I learned the piano and the violin, but I also did lots of sport. So I skied and played rugby, played football on the weekends as well.
Was that all mainstream sport?
Yeah, all mainstream. I did. My eyesight is not, at the time, was not as bad as, say, some others with albinism. My ocular accommodation, which now has gone, and my eyesight has got a lot worse. That's something for anyone who's young and albino with decent eyesight to understand, that we lose it a lot earlier, as I understand. I'm no expert, but that's what I was told. And as a result, my eyesight deteriorated. I stopped doing sport I didn't stop doing sport. I stopped doing this, like the rugby and the other sports, mostly to do with my work, because I travelled around the world with my work, and it kind of absorbed me after university. So I stopped doing the team sports then. And then I came back and I'm now doing walking rugby, which was great. Get to be part of a team again and enjoy the social side, but make an idiot out of myself on a pitch. So it's good fun.
When you were doing sports when you were younger as a child, were you just as good as the other kids?
There would always be the conversation with the referee when I played rugby. Don't worry about his eyes, they always wobble. It was the stamp line. And stop stamping on that, that's not the ball, also was said once or twice. But no, I wasn't any worse than any of the other kids. I have a natural, physically, I'm quite naturally sporty. I do a lot of running and I used to cycle. I tried tandems. Doesn't work for me. I'm too tall. At 6'1", no one could pilot, really. My wife tried. It's not easy being the bigger guy on the back of a tandem.
No.
So I stopped riding about 7 years ago.
Do you run on your own, or do you run with a guide runner?
I had an aneurysm in my left eye and I lost my sight completely, which was quite scary. I don't have any field of vision in my right eye. And then I had an aneurysm in my left eye, microaneurysm, should be said, but my eye meant I lost my vision for about 6 weeks. And when that happened, when I came back to running again, I ran with a guide, which was great, got me back into running again. And then life happened. I stopped running. I had a big project delivery. I stopped doing exercise, stopped doing those things. And since then, either I've got more comfortable with my vision or it's got slightly better. It's difficult to tell because the prescription's not changed. I'm now running without a guide, but picking the times of day when I run because of the light and making sure I've got a well-mapped route that I know and picking the right footwear. I have to wear trail shoes because I stumble quite a lot on things that normal people would be able to see, I suppose, that I miss. And so I have to wear a less stable shoe.
Going back to what you were talking about and what we were chatting about with regards to your parents, they used to go to albinism fellowship events with other people with albinism. Did you go as well? And if you did, what did you think about it? What did you think about being around other people who were the same as you? Did you like it, or was it strange?
It was like just going and having play with some friends, really. It wasn't anything odd to me at all. My parents found it very difficult because they'd been able to pick me out really easily and then suddenly they couldn't. And it was like, where's he gone? Because I was in this sea of albinos. Where's Luke gone? I have no idea. I think they found that quite an experience, to say the least. They do talk about it quite fondly, but it really helped them at the initial stages of understanding what it meant to be albino, or sorry, a person with albinism. I know, got to be politically correct.
Did you kind of feel cool because you were amongst people that understood you and you weren't the only one, or were you literally just totally indifferent to it?
I felt that quite a lot of that projection came from the adults around us because we were just trying to have fun, build. I remember being in this room and just playing with, I think it was sort of Lego or something, and building something with someone else. This sounds wrong, but it was the one time I actually felt like I had an issue because we were all being talked about, and that never happened at home in that regard. Mm-hmm. And that felt a little bit uncomfortable, but it really helped my parents, and I think it gave them a good understanding of what it meant for me. But then they did have the experience of having two older children as well, and the trials and tribulations that come with that. And my mum's also a primary school teacher, so she was used to dealing with kids with difficulties, and because it was evident there was no cognitive issue other than the eyesight, that I think that she was comfortable and she thought things were going to be okay. Mm-hmm. But there's quite a lot of stigma from what I understand about certainly people with poor eyesight being treated poorly from that point of view. And certainly when I was in secondary school, I was told, don't bother trying to go to university. You won't get there.
Was that by your teachers?
By the careers advisor. The teachers didn't really comment on it because academically I was doing okay. I passed all my GCSEs, got my A-levels and went to university. But the careers advisor, and I will never forget that, said, don't bother trying to go to university. Think of something else that you might want to do. So I kicked against it and said, no, I'll go to university. Thanks very much. Still had no idea what I wanted to do.
In terms of like socially and stuff like that, how did you find secondary school? Because some people, I mean, I really struggled with secondary school. I found it really hard socially and emotionally. How was it for you? But some people with albinism don't. They just sail through it and absolutely fine.
It took a long time for me to come into my own. I had a really good core group of friends that I was with from the moment I walked into year 7 until I left at the end of my upper 6th year. And they were fantastic, still are. We stuck together. the thing that really brought me out of myself was music. Funnily enough, we put a band together, and I ended up singing in the band at the school and being one of the maybe two bands out of a school of over 2,000 people, and performing to the school and doing all those things that you wouldn't imagine anyone without any disability would be doing. And I certainly didn't think that way, but I played in orchestras on the violin, and I've done other things performance-wise, but never drama or anything like that. But suddenly standing in front of a hall of 1,000 people with a microphone changed things. It gave me a lot of confidence.
So did you have any negative experiences, though, at secondary school with bullying or anything like that, and name-calling?
There was my first real experience of it, and I didn't really know how to deal with it myself, was when I was in middle school, and a little blonde Dutch girl decided to take a dislike with me, and I had no idea. My brothers had taught me how to deal with little boys that had been difficult with me, but not girls, and I didn't know how to deal with it. A very confusing time for me, being constantly jeered at, and it was not pleasant. And I do remember it very, very vividly. And the secondary school that was next door, the name calling that used to come through the fence line was Mr. Whippy or the Milky Bar Kid, all those sorts of things. It didn't grate too deeply. It was quite upsetting at the time, but not anything that particularly. I laughed about it at the end. Well, as a grown up, I laugh about it now. But and my nickname at university was Chalky.
There you go.
So, there are still people to this day that don't know me by anything other than Chalky.
What I find hysterical, though, speaking to people with albinism, doesn't seem to matter what gender you are, you still get called the same name. So I was Mr. Whippy, I was Father Christmas, I was Casper the Ghost. We didn't stick to any kind of gender. I could be a male too, so you could happily call me any of those things.
Yeah, no, I can relate to that too. And my children now tease me with things that might have been hurtful as a child, but I find quite funny. So they go, "Dad, go on, grow your beard so you can be Father Christmas this year." So
yeah,
all right.
My kids, my kids are like that too, and because we're
how's your beard going? You know.
I mean, they don't say that to me because I'd get really cross. But we're just really open in my house, and literally, my kids are so mean to me about having albinism. But obviously, it's in perfectly good spirits, and I don't mind. Like, if I give you license, like I'm totally up for laughing at myself. If I give you permission, I'm happy for people to laugh at me. It's just when people do it maliciously and, out in the street.
Yeah, there's definitely, and there was that time when Darnell on Big Brother, I was for weird reasons, like people would shout across the street, "Darnell!" I'm like, I don't look like a black man. I have none of those features, and yeah, it didn't bother me again. It was more of okay, but then walking around with people that are new to me, who don't know me, they'll say, "How can you cope with all these people staring at you?" I'm like, are they? I don't see anyone staring at me. Probably because I'm either used to it or I don't see it.
Yeah, I think
probably
it's a combination of the two. It's a combination, isn't it? I think we're blessed with the fact that we can't always see it. But I think you're just so to it, because I've had it every single day of my life, that I think if you were aware of it consciously, you'd probably never leave the house, would you? I think you literally have to not even barely acknowledge it, because if you did, it would become a thing, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and that's actually something that's never been for me. It's never been a thing. So I'm very lucky in that regard. Either I'm completely narcissistic and don't care, or haven't noticed, or it's just not been something that I've ever really I'm not giving it any station.
No, I don't think you can, though. I don't think you can, because once you start to let those kind of thoughts get into your head, you just can't. I don't know. I feel like you wouldn't leave the house, would you? You just can't think about it. It's not a thing.
No, you're right. But I also find I mask quite well. Not as in my albinism, but my eyesight. There's even to this day, very few people in the office that know I have the limiting eyesight that I have until they see me working at my computer. because I often have to present to the board, and I'll have to be on a call like this and talking to you or talking to 50 people, and people have no idea. You've got bad eyesight? Well, I can see you've got glasses, but I didn't realise it was that bad. I find myself constantly having to tell people, no, I can't do that. I can't get there in that amount of time unless I get a taxi. And they're like, what? Can't you drive? No, I can't drive. Or getting to shipyards is a really interesting one for me, because quite often they'll be like, oh, just rent a car when you get to the airport and then drive to Turku. That's not happening. Someone's going to have to come and get me, or I'm going to have to find another way of doing it. But I've always managed to find workarounds. Public transport. When my eyesight got worse, public transport was a lot harder. But I'm back travelling, and I not commute, but I travel very regularly to northern France, northern Italy, northern France at the moment, because that's where the big project that I'm working on is being delivered out of. I have to travel around Europe quite a lot to different factories and suppliers.
Are you confident? Are you confident? Will you ask for help if you need it?
Absolutely, 100%. It's so much easier to get around the airports when you ask for help. People are like, oh no, just come this way. It's through these doors, and you're there, rather than having to go all the way around the duty free. Forget about it.
Do you use a long cane ever?
I use a signalling cane. Sometimes, if it's really busy, I'll use a signalling cane. Otherwise, I don't bother.
Is that because you don't think you need it because of your vision, or it's not something that you like the idea of doing?
No, it's not. I use it to make sure people around me know. It basically gives me license to walk into people, which I do if I don't have it, which sounds a bit too bravado, if I'm honest, but it's the truth. Because I've got no sight on this side, I have my signalling cane so people can see that I can't see from that side, and people don't bother me. If I don't have that, the people are completely unaware, and I do end up walking into them. And what are you doing walking into me? I don't want to say, can't see, so that's why I use the signalling cane. It doesn't bother me to use it. Got no issue at all.
It gets you through airports quite well, doesn't it?
It gets you more than that. Eurostar's brilliant, I have to say. You go up to Eurostar holding a white cane. It's like the Red Sea parts. And they move you through straight away.
That's good.
It's very helpful for that. I mean, you've got to take the rough with the smooth, don't you? I'd much prefer to have perfect eyesight.
Absolutely.
And stand in the 3-hour queue that's going around St Pancras. But no, it's one of there are.
I was going to say, it's a funny one though, isn't it? Because I use a long cane in different situations depending on where I am and what I'm doing, and if it's really sunny, lots of different reasons I'll use one. If I don't, then people have no idea. I'm just as blind as I am when I've got one. It's just people don't know. And then if I bump into somebody or something, you'll have some smart aleck who'll go, could you not do that? Are you blind? And you kind of want to go, yeah, a little bit, actually.
Yeah, but you don't have license to do so when you don't have the cane out. You don't. No. I don't feel like I can go, no, I'm really sorry, I am actually blind.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you feel like you can't say anything because you should be advertising it if you are, and if you're not advertising it, then you're not obviously blind enough.
Absolutely. And there's some, it's about tolerance, isn't it? And if you're willing to put yourself in a position where people may not think you have the disability, then you have to take the rough with the smooth. If you do end up making a mistake due to your disability, people who are deaf, God, it must be so hard for them. At least with visual acuity issues, it's quite obvious when you're trying to read a sign that you're having trouble. If you can't hear announcements, it must be really difficult. So I have a lot of sympathy towards people who have hidden disability.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so, if you're visually impaired, chip out a white cane or something like that, or like you said, and if someone spends 5 seconds looking at our eyes, they'll know there's something not quite right, won't they? So it's not. But if you've got a hidden disability, that's a different ballgame altogether.
Which is why I find it interesting when people who do have albinism want to mask this, because you're taking that one more signal away from people to, especially if you have poor eyesight. It's one of those things that is like, as someone with albinism, if I see someone else with albinism, I'm like, by the way, maybe they need some help. Do you want to make sure that everything's okay? But quite often, most of the people who I've met who have albinism are very strong-willed and often refuse help.
I find it really interesting when people try and hide their albinism, so like dye their hair and wear fake tan and everything, I find it interesting because I think the upkeep of it must be a job in itself, because those roots will come through really quickly and you'll look ridiculous. But also, I feel I wouldn't recognise myself. So if I looked in the mirror and I had brown hair, I feel like I wouldn't know who I was, because the whole of my life I've looked in the mirror and I've had white hair. And whilst I've said this on my podcast before, whilst albinism doesn't define me as a person, it absolutely is part of my identity, because I wouldn't be who I was if I didn't have it. So if I were to hide it, I don't know how I would feel about myself. Does that make any sense?
No, absolutely. Well, ask someone with red hair exactly the same question. It's anything that is identifiable as being different, strikingly different, is definitely something that will drive the way you act and the way people act around you. Even if it's just a glance up at your hairline or a side look, just to, oh gosh, that looks a little bit different. I've caught my attention for a few seconds and then back again. Those little glances all add up. And yeah, it doesn't define you, but it drives the way people do notice you, not necessarily the way they treat you. But people do have prejudices, and they have questions, and often unanswered questions. And because it isn't a standard thing to see someone who's that strikingly white, unless you're going to the opera and everyone around you is 60. And that's another time that people have lost me in crowds.
Amongst the old people.
Yeah. Which is when I went to a concert with my mother-in-law, and she thought she would find it easy to see me in the crowd, and she struggled.
Funny. I had never thought about it, because I think being a woman with albinism is slightly different to being a man. Like, I can have long hair, and I think that doesn't necessarily show your age as much as men who have short hair. Men who have short white hair are going to be old, aren't they? Whereas women who have long white hair could maybe have bleached their hair, or do you know what I mean? It doesn't necessarily denote age, does it?
No, not at all. But I mean, I'd be very interested in doing a social experiment where actually I did dye my hair and then got my close personal family or friends to react to me as someone who didn't have albinism, and see if they recognized me. Because I'm not entirely sure they necessarily would.
No, I don't. I think it's absolutely fascinating, and I would be interested also to know how I would go about conducting myself out in public as well. Would I be different? Would I feel different? I don't know, because I don't walk around every day thinking I've got albinism, I look different. Like, I don't think like that. But having said that, though, maybe if I had black hair, I don't know, I might behave in a different way.
I think it would give me the opportunity, in the same way that other people dress up and hide their identity. It gives you the opportunity to act differently and be outside of your usual personality without anyone knowing. And that obviously opens up different doors to acting in a different way. I don't necessarily think that I would, although I think people around me would act differently, and therefore I would act differently. So again, that's why it would be a really interesting social experiment.
Yeah, I do too. I think it'd be absolutely fascinating. I do.
But that being said, there are people with albinism that do that. They do dye their hair. They do dye their eyebrows and put mascara on, the whole works. And I don't know those people, because they hide themselves so well, But they're so used to doing that is part of who they are, and that's their general routine,
and that's fine too. Everyone has got their own motivations and their own reasoning, and that's fine. I think for me, the reason I don't do it is because I have had a hard time with my albinism throughout my life, and I feel a little bit like I've worked really hard to be okay and happy with who I am, and I don't feel that I need or want to change that to make other people feel okay about looking at me, because ultimately, am I colouring my hair because I offend other people? I don't know, and I don't want to do that because I'm all right with being me.
Absolutely. It comes down to a personal preference. It comes down to the way you behave and want to behave and react and want to have people react to you. It's I don't know. It's difficult to articulate.
When you were growing up, how was dating, was going out with girls and stuff an issue? Did you have the confidence in yourself to do that? How was all that kind of dating game for you?
Not really. I never really did the dating game. I had an innate fear of rejection that I never really confronted as a teenager. I then went to university and grew up. So I can't say I ever really did that. Certainly as a teenager, it was not something I really combated, but that was just me. Others were different. I certainly wasn't out of the ordinary in my friendship group in that regard. A lot of my friends had girlfriends. A lot of my female friends had boyfriends, but not everyone. And I didn't see myself as out of the ordinary, for want of another word to describe it. I certainly didn't take any affirmative action to the shall we say. I didn't go and ask girls, do you want to go out? If I was to say to my younger self now, I would say don't do anything differently than you did, because they're transactional relationships at that age. Unless you truly meet the person you absolutely adore, then it's just a learning curve. And for anyone that is listening, I wouldn't worry about it unless it really does bother you, in which case take some affirmative action and do something about it, and don't fear rejection, because everyone gets rejection and you have to learn how to deal with it, because it's not something you can't.
I wish I had that advice when I was that age. I think for me, I didn't even contemplate that I could have a relationship. I didn't contemplate that I could have a boyfriend. I just assumed for a really long time, because of how boys were towards me and other people at my school, that nobody would ever like me. So there was no point in even thinking about it, because it was just something that wasn't ever going to happen. Like, having a boyfriend wasn't ever going to be part of my landscape. So I never even thought about it.
And now
I have a husband and children.
You have a husband and children. You get there in the end, and sometimes it's not the defining moment for some people having relationships, and it might be seen as the most important thing for media and social media and everyone else, or it doesn't matter about anyone else. And that's the thing that I had to learn, is you matter. No one else. You matter. People around you, your loved ones, obviously matter, but for this particular instance, the most important thing is happiness and kindness. And to be kind and happy are two of the most important things. And they're the things I teach my kids. If someone's telling you will be happy by doing something that you don't think is quite right or right for you, it's probably not right for you. You take your time, you find your place, and it's not easy. Nothing is easy, but you'll feel comfortable once you've found the right thing. And it's a personal journey, and it will take as long as it takes, is what I will say.
Absolutely. Back to your career, did you always know what you wanted to do, and were your career choices, did your eyesight have any bearing on what you've chosen to do in terms of careers?
Good question. I don't necessarily think that you would meet many people in shipbuilding who have poor eyesight like I have it, or work for a cruise line that goes to the Caribbean and South America and the hottest parts of the Middle East as an albino. At this point in time, no. Now, whether I had or have a better aural acuity because of my poor eyesight is another point. And if I ended up working as a sound engineer because of that, and because I was musical because of that, then there's an innate possibility that is the case. But it certainly didn't define what I'm doing today. And it wasn't the driver for what I wanted to do. I found what I loved doing, which was working in sound and entertainment. And that drove me in the decisions to do things I studied at A-level and then at university. And then I didn't know what I wanted to do out of university. And I applied for everything left, right and centre. But I came out and I was a typist. I went and worked for an agency and did typing, because I could type at 110 words a minute, because I'd been a trained typist at school. And very few people were back in the early 2000s, certainly my age, and people who are willing to go and do temping work, whilst I then decided what I would do with my degree. And I applied for jobs all over the place. And I finally got interviewed for a job working for Princess Cruise Lines and went away to sea for 7 years and learned all aspects of theatrical technical management.
Whilst you were applying for jobs, did you face any kind of discrimination in the workplace, do you think?
I think that I was very nervous and very cognizant about needing a driving license and being worried about passing a medical for the marine side. And certainly when I got on board and I was told, oh, by the way, you'd be running a follow spot. And I was like, I'll be doing what? You mean I've got to point that light at that person and be able to see them in a blackout? It's not happening. Sorry. But I did manage to find a workaround. And they adapted for me when I told them what my limitations were, and all was fine. But it was a conversation I had to have every single time I went to a different ship with a different production manager, until I was that production manager and I didn't need to do it anymore, which was only after a couple of contracts. So yeah, there were moments, certainly, but it's about managing yourself and managing to articulate the difficulties you have with the people that are managing you so that they can make the adaptations. And they do. They absolutely do. The HR team I have at my work at the moment is exceptional in that regard. They absolutely look after the staff because they see the value in everything else you do.
So you're absolutely really honest about your vision at work and your limitations and
100%. Why shy away from it? Until a point where I was like, are you sure you're going to let me walk around a shipyard? And they checked with the insurers and everything was fine. I was like, really? Okay, fine. But I know what I'm doing. I plan. I make sure I've got the right provisions in place. I make sure I'm with people, which is actually the only real safe thing to do when you are working in these large construction sites. And I get on and do my job, which ultimately isn't lifting a finger when I'm on site. I just go there to ironically observe and make sure everything's on track. But it's well managed, and it can be for anyone. I think I've landed on my feet in some ways in that I work for a large enough organisation to be able to accommodate that sort of change, and that's not always the case. And I appreciate that, and it can be a real challenge for some people, certainly with vision and presenting and finding workarounds in meetings when people are presenting on boards, especially live, rather than being over Zoom or Teams or on video calls. But in the space, people think you're not being attentive because you've got your phone out, but actually what you're doing is you're zooming in on the screen that's in front of you so you can see what's being read. But then people know me now, and I don't operate it. It's an enormous company, but I operate at a level now where I'm dealing with the same people all the time and they recognize what my needs are. So it's managed.
If you could go back to your 15-year-old self, your teenage years, what, with all the knowledge that you have now in relation to being someone with albinism, what would you say to yourself?
Confidence, and it'll all come, and don't have anxiety about it because you'll get there in the end. And I'm testament to that, I think, because I did have all of those anxieties that every single teenager does. I think it's not just exclusively for people with albinism, but it does. You find your way. And for all the worries and for all the concerns that you have about the way you look or the way that people perceive you or the way that the road ahead will be difficult with your eyesight or any other difficulties that you are having, you find a way. I have a loving family. I have 3 children. I have my career's my career, and life's not bad.
Thank you so much for listening to that edition of Albinism Life. I really enjoyed chatting with Luke. He's one of these people that I think I could talk to all day. He's got many wise words. I hope you enjoyed it too. If you want to get in touch, please email info@albinism.org.uk and see me for the next edition of Albinism Life. Bye.